We've been talking about uncomfortable truth, the truth about anger and gluttony and lust and sin such as this. But today we reach an uncomfortable truth about greed. I was in Russia not long ago, and I was having a conversation with one of the wonderful citizens of Russia who was telling me about the attempts of a nation to move toward capitalism. He made an interesting comment. He said, it's easier for Americans to be capitalist rather than communist because there is a moral underpinning of the Ten Commandments in your nation. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, when you have these laws of God that are generally respected in the values of society, it's much easier to form a capitalistic society. I found myself thinking a little later, those underpinnings are beginning to disappear, especially when it comes to greed and materialism. What was once a sin that we were ashamed of has now become a virtue in our culture. The ability to accumulate, to amass, to get. In a culture like ours, it has become the name of the game or the sport that's being played. You, like many other people, have looked at the salaries of CEOs of the great companies of America. You've looked at the salaries of the university presidents. You've looked at salaries of athletes. You've looked at this and said, boy, something is amiss. To put these kinds of values on these kinds of people, just somehow this separation of the rich and the poor, and everyone longing for and reaching for that next sense of what I want, what I have to have. I see that quite often in the surveys about why people go to college. Decades ago, people were going to college to find meaningful work for their life to count. And now we've watched just very gradually as the making of a great income becomes the driving motivation of a younger America. And now the fact that we can see the new products on the screen of a cell phone, we're inundated with the latest gadget technology. The sense of our life is not everything that it ought to be unless I can have what I want. And I can have it now because everyone has a credit card and I can go get it now. Greed is a new thing for us. We're dealing with it in ways we've never had to deal with it before. But it's not a new sin. Greed is as old as the Garden of Eden. You have Adam and Eve. Everything they need is there. God has provided it for them. And yet God has said to them, there is a tree in the center of the garden. It's mine and mine alone. And God has given to them the commandment that they would respect this boundary that He places around the tree. In other words, God has put the creatures in a setting in which they cannot have everything they want. And that is a part of normalcy for them in their relationship with God. Just think about that for a moment. That every want of the human creature, God does not intend that it be satisfied or fulfilled. And yet Adam and Eve do not like the arrangement. And with the coaching of the serpent, they reach for the forbidden fruit and they eat it. They transgress the very boundary that God has created. We are now a culture and a society that doesn't like this kind of boundariedness. The credit card companies are telling us you deserve it, you can have it, and you can have it now. We've seen the economic collapse of our own nation by those who have wanted homes that they could not afford to make a mortgage payment on, to drive cars that they could not afford to make payments on. We've wanted so much, and everyone else seems to have it. It's my turn. Why can't I have it? And if I can't have it, somehow I'm being violated or my right is being infringed upon, and I'm less than what I really want to be. This, my friends, is the sin of greed. Greed that so attaches itself to us that we are driven into this wanting and having to have. One of the ways that God's people deal with greed is a grand old practice called tithing. Tithing is the practice of recognizing that God is the sovereign owner of everything by taking the first tenth of what is entrusted to us and returning that to God. I've heard a lot of church-going people say throughout my lifetime, well, tithing is a part of Old Testament law. That was outdated. It was abolished in Christ when the old law died and the new law came in. Well, not exactly. Because tithing really didn't show up with the giving of the law. It predated the law as one of the principles of God, very much like Sabbath and other principles that we find about life itself. I even think that tithing has its roots in the Garden of Eden, where God says to Adam and Eve, the tree in the center of the garden, it's mine, and you are to respect it. And the practice of tithing, the very formative understanding behind it, is Adam and Eve in the garden with everything provided for them, recognizing this tree in the center of the garden is God's and God's alone, and I will not touch it, and that will be my obedient recognition that God is the sovereign owner of the garden, and I am a steward of all that God has provided. Then a few chapters later, we find the Abraham and Melchizedek story, and Abraham pays tithe to Melchizedek, and it's the way of Abraham saying, I want to recognize that all the spoil of conquering this tribe has come to me as the gift of God, and I pay this tithe to you, the high priest of Salem, Melchizedek. I pay this tithe as a recognition that God is the owner of all. And as tithe does find its way into law, and as it unfolds, it becomes the way that the people of God, rather than amassing it all, consuming it all, owning it all, it is the way that the people of God recognize God as owner and themselves as stewards. When we get to the last book of the Old Testament, the book of Malachi, the people are in bad shape. They're trying to rebuild a community and an economy that's been destroyed by captivity. And one of the things that is said to them by the prophet is, you're robbing God. Bring the tithes and the offerings into the storehouse, and God can once again open His blessing upon you. I think what the prophet is saying is, you're raiding my tree again. You're robbing me of that which belongs to me and me alone. Greed is defeated in the human heart when there is that act of obedience that takes the first tenth, offers it back to God as a way of submitting our entire life to God. It's an ancient practice that to revive it will go a long way towards saving us from a materialistic culture that defines us according to what we own, have, and can consume and control. There's a better way to live than this. There are many of us that I think have even questions beyond tithing that we need to ask, especially in terms of greed. Let me share a personal example out of my own life. Most of the jobs that I've taken in life, I've made a little less than I did the job before, which leads my wife to always say to me when I head to a job interview, she said, be sure and ask them how much the salary is this time. Because as a family, we've specialized in tightening the belt, trying to be generous on limited income through much of our life. But this last job as a university president, I'm well taken care of by the university that I serve. For the first time in my life, a $50,000 jump in salary from one job to a new job. I found myself wondering, what does being a good steward of resources in a greedy world look like with a salary increase like this? I mean, I can buy the really big house, I can drive the new car, I can wear the expensive suits, I can have all the toys that I've always walked past because I was never able to afford them before. As Denise and I have thought about that, we've decided that our salary is set. We've set it at a level. And as year by year salary increases come, it's been our decision not to increase our living expenses, but to let inflation year by year cause us to have to live more carefully than the year before, and then to give away everything above that baseline. There are a lot of Christians who do this, not as some kind of heroic act of martyrdom, but as a way of saying, this amount meets all of our needs. Anything more that God provides, we will seek to help care for the needy of the world. We'll seek help fund college education for needy students. We'll make sure that our church thrives and is able to do the ministries that God wants us to do. We'll care for our own family members. It is one of the practices alongside tithing that causes us to know that we would put a boundary around certain income, and we would say, this is for others and not for us. I think if we're going to be delivered from greed in a world like ours, we need to hear the uncomfortable truth that the people of God are called to steward the resources God has given to us in ways that care for others and in ways that bring glory and honor to our God. My prayer is that as you've gone through this study of the 7 deadly sins, that you as a group have had some honest conversations about the intricate ways that sin entangles us and becomes deadly in our life. Sin will never be defeated by looking it square in the eye and saying, I'm going to beat you. No, we never drive sin out of our own lives. John Wesley was right. He said, love expels sin. And when we open ourselves to the ways of God and all the practices that we've talked about, from feasting to fasting, from tithing to generous giving, when we open ourselves to blessing and rest and all of the precious gifts God has given to us, we are receiving the very love of God, the ways of God that bring His love to the core of our being. And in comparison with this love of God richly dwelling within us, sin is a cheap imitation of something that's dying, and it is expelled from our life. May the love of God expel the sin in your life, and may you be radically hopeful and optimistic about the redemptive power of God to save us all from the 7 deadly sins. God be with you and bless you.